Hey everyone, and welcome to another exciting episode of Mitch's Mega Minute. Today's going to be a very special episode. As it turns out, no one could really make it tonight, or just in general, there was just some mix-ups and confusion. So unfortunately, I'm going to be running this one a little solo, but it kind of works thematically with what we're going to be talking about tonight. And we'll kind of get into that in just a little bit. But I just wanted to thank you all for coming on, and let's go ahead and get started. So channel news this week, we have pretty much the same standard stuff we're gonna get. On Tuesday we're gonna do more Fire Emblem, Thursday still Persona, and then Friday is another episode of Fire Emblem. And then we're gonna try to fit in some Love and get some more Amnesia recorded on Tuesday. It's gonna be a good time. So hopefully that'll all work itself out. There's also the new Pokemon Mystery Dungeon demo we were thinking about playing, and there's other things that we were trying to consider doing, but it's all if time permits, So we'll kind of play that one by ear. But I'm actually really excited to talk about today's subject. I think that was the fastest I've ever gone through that the channel news bit. Because today we're going to be talking about a subject that I think is super interesting. This week I spent a lot of time. I had some actual time off, and I was able to just relax and watch some stuff that I've been meaning to get to. And we're going to be talking a little bit about it today. But we're going to also be talking about a very interesting central theme with each one of these things. And before we go into that, I want to kind of talk to you a little bit about what I think kind of kickstarted in my mind of the zeitgeist mind of what we're talking about today. So the movie Logan came out a few years ago, right? And this movie we've already talked about on the show. I'm sure we must have mentioned it. This is one of my favorite movies. Not even just from it being a superhero movie, but it really feels like every actor is giving it their all. It's a Western, it's fun, and if you find grim adventures across kind of a dead wasteland fun, because it's I don't know, it's a good adventure. It definitely felt like one of those old kind of Western movies, and this movie is essentially Wolverine finds out he has a daughter that the government kind of made, and he's going to go and take her all the way from Mexico all the way up to Canada, to kind of give her a chance of life. And over the course of it, he's also dealing with a Professor Xavier who is dealing with Alzheimer's, and he's trying his best to save up the money to get a boat. His dream is for them to go live on a boat out there and sail off and deal with that. And it's if you haven't seen it, go see it. It's one of the best films I think of its year. I think of 2018. It's so good. And I remember watching that trailer with my dad for the first time, and just the trailer. If you're gonna watch it, I would recommend before watching it, go watch the trailer that features the song. It's when you have a memory that's just so full of music, you have to fucking, oh my god, I feel so bad. It's Johnny Cash is Hurt. I'm so sorry. Yeah, so there's a trailer that uses Johnny Cash is Hurt, and that's the first trailer they released for Logan. And I was sitting with my dad when we were watching that, and just watch, he's watching the trailer, and I remember just behind me was you just heard him say oh my god, because it's everything's so depressing and sour, and it's, mind you, we had so many stories that were coming from this Marvel Cinematic Universe in which everything was so uplifting and everything, everything was a fun adventure. To have something like Logan, which was more of a traditional Western, just kind of blew it out of the water. It's to me, it's one of the best movies that was made in 2018, and it's still a hallmark. And the reason I'm bringing this up in 2020 is because I think what happened was, and there's other films obviously that existed that kind of brought it together, But Logan kind of painted this picture and this desire for a story that we hadn't seen in a while, which is the modernized Western. Or in this case, something, if you notice in the title of this video, I called it Modern Cowboys and Ronin because there's also, I didn't put the image in. Son of a bitch. I'm so good at this, guys. That's how you know I'm amazing at podcasting. But there is, god damn it. 50 screen. There we go. So there is a movie, a Japanese movie from 1972 called Lone Wolf and Cub. It's a 6 film franchise. It's a whole thing, and a lot of people use Lone Wolf and Cub as kind of like quintessential Ronin films, and it's essentially it's the same concept and idea. You have the main character take his son around, while also all these bad guys and stuff want to fight him, and there's some really good action scenes. I watched the movie one time when I was younger, and I feel like it's definitely overdue on a second viewing, but it's, I don't know, to me it's one of those films that just is really solid. I'd have to rewatch it. I feel like it's definitely overdue. I definitely need to watch it. But the point is that Ronin movies and Western films tend to have the same themes. Normally, it's about a loner who comes in, and when I'm saying Westerns, I'm very specifically talking about spaghetti Westerns. I'm talking about the good old Clint Eastwood movies with some of the best goddamn soundtracks around. It's always about a loner comes into town, handles the situation. Or goes on this adventure, and at the very end of the film, either dies in some of these movies, or rides off into the sunset for another adventure somewhere far away, and it's something that's very appealing to, I guess, I feel like it's something that's very appealing because it's this is a folk hero, it's that type of archetypal character that is just, that is of legend, that, you speak of, it's the folk hero. He wanders around, travels the lands, helps people, or himself sometimes, And the 3 things we're going to talk about tonight are kind of this resurgence of this archetype, I feel, that happened in the last 3 months, with, I think the last one being kind of a weaker example, but I am looking forward to kind of seeing how that goes. It'll depend on the trajectory of that series, because the other 2 have had their first season just finish, and the last one just started up last week, so we're going to talk about that a little bit. And I think we can kind of go into The Mandalorian! That's right, everyone. We talked about The Mandalorian for a couple weeks, and we stopped talking about The Mandalorian episode to episode because every episode was great. Even if it wasn't great, it was good. And it's much harder, I feel, to talk about what makes something work because everything is great. Something I really appreciate about The Mandalorian is the OST. I think the soundtrack to this series has been really solid in establishing its own tone. The Mandalorian's theme is so, in my mind, it's on repeat in my mind, and it's iconic. I feel like it's one of those things where it's it captures that essence that Star Wars' extended universe kind of has, in which I don't know. It has Western tones. It has some of those Ronin tones. Give it a shot if you haven't listened to it. Go give it a listen. It definitely feels like an established piece of Western media because there's actually, funny enough, there's actually an acoustic cover of this theme, and when you hear it, it's oh yeah, that totally could just be for a Western movie. It just sounds just really on the nose and on spot with it, but The Mandalorian was one of the I was so worried about this one. The Mandalorian was one of those things where it's they either really knock it out of the park or it's gonna end up being a flop, because I feel like Boba Fett going from being a costume to a culture to a people to a show about a guy that wasn't Boba Fett, and then they kicked out Boba Fett and Jango. They're not Mandalorians. And there's recently a cartoon where they, the Clone Wars, where they kind of made a big effort to kind of be like, well, Jango is considered a bad guy. We don't want these characters to be like immediately considered bad guys. So we're gonna make it so that, oh yeah, Jango stole that armor, and Boba's just wearing the stolen armor, or not. So he's not a real Mandalorian, despite everything about the extended universe and such. Which is a whole nother conversation. The mistreatment of the Legends canon is like a whole nother thing. But the Mandalorian is like one of like the best shows of last year, you know? Every episode, it's an episodic adventure. The Mandalorian comes in, and he does a job. Normally, the job involves protecting Baby Yoda, because the first job he does in the show, the second job he does in the show, is to go get this asset and give it back to the bad guy. And the bad guy says, you know, I want the baby. Let me see the child. And like, you know, like he's clearly bad guy. It's remnants of the Empire, whole thing. I think I compared it to like Nazis in hiding, like something like that, where it's just like you get that immediately, like, oh, these are the bad guys. These are evil dudes. And every episode after he kind of saves Baby Yoda is about them going on some weird space adventure. There's an episode where they have to free a dude out of like a jail transport. There's an episode where they go to a village on a far off planet and they have to train people to fend off. You know, that one felt like the most Western to me. It's just them like going to that planet, going to that village, helping the people out, and then being forced to leave, you know? And there's so many times in which the show just delivered, you know? And that's why I feel like it's kind of hard to talk about it, because it's like, there's not a lot of complaints. I think the weakest episode to me was the one where they went back to Tatooine, which is the planet from episode 4, where you know, they go to like Mos Eisley. I think they even end up in Mos Eisley spaceport, and just having that like be like it kind of cruxing on this idea of like, oh look, this is the most nostalgic episode. And on top of that, the kid bounty hunter storyline was kind of, I'm upset that it didn't really go anywhere. It felt kind of, it's like, yeah, this guy's too, you know, big for his britches. He's trying to be the Han Solo type. And then he gets a little too big, and then the Mando kills him. It's like a whole thing. And then the last 2 episodes, like, really just delivered, you know, bring some of the favorite side characters back for one big final romp to deal with the bad Imperial. Having the bad Imperial get killed by an even bigger bad Imperial, and then having like, just killing off a character that I'm like, oh, I didn't realize I cared this much for him, you know, like the Nick Nolte character. And then just everything about the final 2 episodes is just a solid finale. Like it's not the most big and bombastic thing like a traditional Star Wars adventure would have. When I say traditional Star Wars adventure, I mean like the main films where everything has to kind of end in a big bombastic way. But like it was good. Like, you know, him hooking onto the TIE fighter and strapping the bombs on. Like it felt like, I don't know. I think I cared more. You know, like you can only watch so many people like get into these big starfights, because, you know, like there's something about it where watching this guy we've just, you know, the Mandalorian is not perfect. He doesn't like instant kill every single person like someone else on this list. He gets like, you know, he gets punched, he gets beaten down, you know, he you know, his armor is armor. It's not gonna like give him super kung fu powers and, you know, like fucking all sorts of dumb mystical Jedi shit. He's just a guy who's doing the shit. So like watching him hook onto the TIE fighter and then like do that stuff, like you actually care. Like, oh my god, is it gonna break his fucking legs? Like, you know, or like, is it gonna get damaged? Is it gonna get hurt? And like, you know, just having those moments, having him, you know, take Baby Yoda, put him back, and then gets in the spaceship, goes off on another grand adventure somewhere far away, while the bad guy is revealed to be survived. It all just feels like such a great grand adventure. a big thing I noticed with a lot of these shows that we're going to talk about tonight is how they're kind of episodic in nature. Now, obviously, I still don't entirely know about the third one. The third one, we're going to get to that. But, like, the first two shows, they're episodic in nature. They're both, they both go on these, like, kind of, like, little one-off adventures that kind of really paint the personality and give flavor to the character, and the more you watch it, the more you're, like, invested in their adventure. Because instead of having one ongoing long adventure in Lord of the Rings style, you have a bunch of mini episodes in which you see the main character establish themselves in that world, And it's, I don't know, he's a man of very little words, the Mandalorian, and it really works for what it is. And obviously, everyone loves Baby Yoda. Everyone, they just love that little green grandma. They just love him so much. And it's I don't know, it's such a good packaged show, and for Disney Plus, that was, I still have my doubts about Disney Plus. I still don't like the fact that when Disney did that, when they said they were going to make their own streaming service, that essentially they opened the floodgates for NBC, Universal, and all this shit. Because unfortunately, for Netflix, a lot of people are pulling their things out because they want to make a strong streaming platform, and we've already done an episode talking about that. But yeah, Mandalorian was super solid. It was super good. Like I said, I don't really have that many complaints. Because I just felt it was really good. This next show we'll be talking about follows the same kind of patterns that the Western does, but it's The Witcher! So I know what you're thinking. Where Mandalorian had a very direct parallel in the way that everything was stylized, how even some of the promotional art was more made for a was made for a Western. The Witcher isn't like a direct comparison in that way, but there are some notable things about his adventure, He is like a folk hero, to the point where they even have a bard character, Jaskier. I think I'm pronouncing his name right. He like is this like the first episode he's introduced to. He's like, hey, you could use an image lift. Like, let me tell the tales and all this stuff. And watching through the episodes and seeing how that kind of works and how his name actually is spread around their world. Gerald of Rivera, Rivera. Fucking. So if you guys don't know, I did talk about The Witcher about 2 weeks ago. I talked about The Witcher on an emergency little Mitch's Minute because I wanted to get it out there. I wanted to talk about it. I felt like I wanted to just kind of, express an opinion about it because it was still fresh in my mind. And I had mentioned in that episode that, like, hey, I might continue watching this. I don't really know. I'm really glad I did. This is another one of those shows with, like, kind of the loner hero. Look at that guy. Just look at him. Just look at Henry Cavill just being the loner hero. All gruff and ripped and fucking able to take down monsters and stuff. The thing that I like the most about the show, and using this kind of example of the Ronin hero, of the Western hero, is that much like these old movies, you do have a constant, how do I word this? The hero is always going to be your rough and gruff guy, Even in the Mandalorian himself, like, is more of a quiet guy, more like Clint Eastwood, right? Where Geralt is he's quiet, but he's also, like, easy to anger, and he's just trying to make his way. He's super knowledgeable about monsters and stuff. But the thing with the Mandalorian is that you're offset by Baby Yoda, which is a cute, like, it's like you have the tin can and you have a baby, right? And that's pretty much the cast of that show. In this one, Geralt is doing his own adventures, and sometimes Jaskier will come and, he's the bard, he's the comic relief of the show. And then it cuts to Yennefer, who's the witch and who's his love interest, and it does obviously obviously it's a little bit of a stretch when I'm calling this, a little bit of a Westerner, of that kind of story. But the reason I am is because these are episodic adventures. While you do have an ongoing storyline throughout each one of these hour-long episodes, as much as I like this show, the fact that each one of these episodes was an actual hour did kind of drag it out a little. There's a lot going on, but Jesus Christ. But you have these little episodic adventures that are out of time, mind you. One of the fans had mentioned that to me. And there are hints about it, I think, in the third episode that these stories are out of time. But there's like the big in your face moment that is like, oh shit, this isn't happening at the same time. So there's the little adventures you have with Geralt, whether it's fighting monsters, finding a cure to a curse, escorting Yasker to go and Yaskier to go to like a royal wedding, which establishes other things. Whether it's, him trying to find a Jin's bottle to cure his insomnia, having his moments with Yennefer, or even the Yennefer bits. You have these bits that are out of line. Each character is very unique and interesting. And I was actually really worried that Yaskier was gonna be like really annoying, but I actually really liked him. He was really fun, and I kind of missed him when he wasn't around. I kind of missed having that contrast. But you also have the Ciri line, in which the princess is trying to run away, and every episode you get more pieces of what's happening to her and her storyline, and that's kind of the current timeline. And then at the very end, I should have said spoilers. I should have told everyone spoilers before we even got into this stuff, because I'm going to be talking. I'm going to be talking about spoilers. I'm so sorry, everyone. But like at the very end of the show, Gerald and Ciri finally meet up. Like, Ciri's been trying to find Gerald this entire time. Throughout all 8 episodes, she's, her grandmother's last dying words were, "Go find Gerald of, Gerald of Rivia," and she's trying to find him at the very last episode it happens. And so you're never entirely sure about the timeline. Even in the last episode, there's moments where you don't know if, like, it goes from being like decades apart to like being like an hour or so. You don't know. Like, it's like there's still that divide. And apparently in season 2 they're not going to do that as much, because obviously both story bits have finally come together. I was really skeptical about this show. I was really, really skeptical about this show. And fuck it. There's even a video where I talk about how skeptical I was. But this ended up being like one of my favorite like shows. I'm actually very upset that there isn't more of this to watch, where there isn't more of an adventure to kind of go on. I own The Witcher 3. I think I impulse bought it like a couple years back, and I tried playing it, but obviously I didn't have any of the context of the story whatsoever, so I couldn't get into it. But like, I've really grown to like these characters, There's some depth there. I think everyone does a really good job acting. I'll say this: my favorite episode, I think, is the episode. The wedding episode's pretty solid, where Gerald has to go and like save Yasker from just like spiteful people. Just people he cuckolded, which I think was pretty funny. The episode with the dragon hunt was another really solid one, and that's the thing. I think almost every episode is like really solid and memorable. Save for like I would also argue that the show was a little slow to begin. Episode 1 didn't really win me over. Episode 2 did. It started to win me over. The introduction, like episodes 2 story threads weren't that interesting to me. It did introduce some concepts, like it obviously introduced Yennefer as a character, but like the whole thing with the elves and the weird satyr man who's not a satyr, that was less so. But like, you need those episodes to kind of go forward. It almost feels like 2 pilot episodes and to me, that's really hard to recommend to people. Is like, yeah, it's a super great show. By the way, 2 full hours of pilot episode. But you need those establishing moments, because once episode 3 hits, it's in it to win it, you know? Once you have episode 3 and you're on that adventure where with the curse and everything, like it's a good time, you know? And also Yennefer is one of my favorite characters in the show. Do not get it twisted. Like Geralt is cool and everything like that, but Yennefer is I just love her ambition as a character. She's so driven for power and importance, and it's just I really am enjoying this, and it almost makes me wonder if maybe, just maybe, if it wasn't for the oversaturation of Game of Thrones, maybe I would have enjoyed it. But to be honest with you, I don't think I would have. I guess I'll never know, because I'm waiting to watch it for some reason. But that's the thing, you know. You're watching Geralt kind of deal with the monster of the day or the monster of the week, and interacting with characters and stuff like that. It's just classic adventure, 100%. You know. Real quick, I'm gonna go ahead, and I realize this entire time I've been screaming into the void, and I haven't really checked the comments or anything on this video, so that's my bad. And I'm gonna go ahead and open that now, if it'll do it. But yeah, so that being said, oh jeez, I guess I did miss a lot in the chat today. But yeah, so it's gonna be an interesting show. I'm definitely excited to see kind of how it goes and where it goes and stuff like that. And then kind of for the final one for the night, because these episodes where it's just me, like it can get a little draggy. We're gonna go ahead and talk about the first episode of Deathstroke: Knights and Dragons. So this is another one of the it's Ronin, right? He wields a katana. No, it's this is another one of those shows where it's much like how The Witcher and Mandalorian kind of have their stories, in which like the Mandalorian has to escort Baby Yoda around and kind of figure out what to do with him, where Geralt is tied to destiny with Ciri, and has to kind of deal with that. Something I wasn't expecting with Deathstroke: Knights and Dragons was Deathstroke Slade Wilson's desire to save his son, which I think is like really interesting to like do for a show. I don't know how it's gonna go forward. I'm really curious, but like so far, I have watched like an episode or two of the Harley Quinn show, and the quality of these animation shows is just really, like, these animated shows are just really solid. I don't know, it's definitely like out there in the sense of like, how to word this? It's very violent. This show, like The Witcher, had its moments. Some of it was for comedic effect. Some of it was just flat out gross, and some of it was. One of my favorite moments is the moment in which it was the hardest to watch. There's a moment in The Witcher which is the hardest moment to watch for me, but it was such a great character moment for Yennefer, and that was like, it was like, oh my god, they really they're going into that, and I'm like, oh shit, I had no idea. Oh, another thing, real quick, before we continue to talk about Deathstroke, I kind of want to just mention with The Witcher. I have no fucking clue about anything about The Witcher. This is like I said, I played the game for a little bit, and I couldn't get into it because I didn't know anything that was going on. I had no context for the books or anything like that. So, there's that. So like, yeah, we'll deal with that when we talk about that again. But yeah, so Deathstroke. So yeah, Deathstroke is an interesting one. The first episode had a lot of exposition. Obviously they kind of have to establish everything, especially because he is a villain, quote unquote, which it's interesting how they're doing this. So Deathstroke in the first episode, spoilers for the first episode, go check it out. It's actually really solid. If you don't want to get any spoilers on this, but it is just the first episode though. Deathstroke goes on a mission as a mercenary. They start establishing some stuff. They establish that he's on a call with his wife. And they're talking about how, she's like, oh, when you're away, I can't help but think about the affair that you had, Deathstroke. And they talk about that, and they show that he has a son. And he reads. It's a very cute little scene where he reads a little bit of the story about Knights and Dragons, which is his son's favorite book. And then he goes on his mission, kills a bunch of bad dudes, comes home to find that his son has been kidnapped by someone named the Jackal, who apparently works for Hive or something. And then he goes, tries to save his son. Something bad happens during the rescue, and his wife and him separate. Not just because of the affair, but also because of the fact he lied that everyone thought he was a businessman, but he's a fucking mercenary. And then they kind of go into little bits of his story where they gave him the superhero serum that just took a while to kind of kick in, like DC's Captain America, except without a shield, so he just has to use fucking swords and shit. This guy is a super soldier. In fact, I actually thought that his voice actor was the guy who voiced Soldier 76 because it sounds that similar. I have no idea who voices him, but the point is that the episode kind of takes a turn in which you go 10 years later, and shit continues to happen. They fucking kidnap the son again, and the son has developed weird powers because his dad was super powered. And so now, he does this whole thing, goes on a mission. Every scene is action packed. It's fucking balls to the walls of just fucking action. It feels definitely like almost like a 1980s movie where it's just over the top, where it's like there's a scene which this guy fucking Deathstroke stabbed a guy when he went to go punch him. The blade went through his forearm into his shoulder and came out the other end, right? And so he fights the same guy years later, and he has a robot arm. It does the same thing to him, that's how over the top it is. There's in this scene here in the little image I'm using is him going to going somewhere in South America and is trying to overthrow the government or something like that because of just how fucked up everything is, and just expects to be paid and shit. It's a whole thing. Go watch it. I don't know if people are watching the CW seed. I don't know, but this was actually a really pleasant surprise. The Harley Quinn show was also really solid. The humor in it, definitely the voice acting performances is really fun, and there's a lot of moments that just I'm surprised they do that. I'm also weirdly, not to tangent here into that one real quick, I'm actually surprised that they didn't do the Ivy Harley thing, since that's canon. I think they're building up to it. I think they're gonna. That's the direction they're gonna go. Is they're gonna build into that, hopefully. But yeah, Deathstroke, Knights and Dragons. It's surprisingly really, really good. I'm really enjoying myself with this one. And I think that like I said, it didn't have the same kind of central theme of the Western hero, or Ronin in the similar sense that the other two have. But I would argue that it kind of also does. He goes from place to place, kind of trying to get information, trying to figure out what the next thing is. It definitely feels like an adventure, and it's some of the themes, in terms of how the progress goes, feels very much like one of those films. All right, that was my loosely pieced together episode of the podcast. This is what happens when you plan a podcast literally seconds before it's supposed to start, and you're just kind of grabbing everything you possibly can. So, anyways, guys, thank you so much for for watching another episode. So I don't know if these episodes even work when it's just me. I really, really don't know. If you guys could leave a comment or just a like or something like that, let me know that at least I was okay by myself. I think I might have mentioned it before. I'm not really when I do videos and stuff, and when I do even like specifically the podcast, you know, my biggest fear of the podcast and doing it by myself is that like I can't really keep it. There's no one to talk to besides you guys. So I don't really get like a direct feedback every single time when I either crack a joke or talk about a subject, or I wasn't even sure if you would be interested in today's subject. So like I don't really have a good gauge of that kind of stuff unless I'm directly talking with someone. But yeah, so the point is, thank you guys so much for listening in. I know it's a little bit of a shorter episode, but hey, last time I did this, I talked for 2 hours. And unless you guys want me to talk about Assassin's Creed Odyssey and how fucking awesome that game is, and how because it was so good, I ended up purchasing Origins because it was on sale for like $14. And I that's like going to be my next big game, I feel. Then I'm pretty sure you guys don't want to hear me yammer on about a game that came out like 2 years ago. So anyways, it was really good to kind of watch. It was really good to come back on for you guys. I love doing the podcast, and we'll catch y'all next time. Next time, everyone. Hopefully we'll have an actual other person here, and I can talk more about my dumb stuff that's going on. Later.